Two Muslim brothers hid in a cemetery until Zohran Mamdani arrived and a miracle happened. We have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and become part of our dream too. The wind cut through the bare branches like broken whispers as two young boys hurried between the gravestones. Yusuf, 15, held his little brother's hand tightly, pulling him deeper into the old Muslim cemetery hidden behind a rusted gate in the Bronx. The moonlight flickered across the marble markers, casting pale shadows on their trembling faces. "Is this really safe?" Omar asked, his voice barely above a breath. Yusuf didn't answer immediately. He scanned the dark rows of graves, listening for footsteps, sirens, or the voices of the men who had chased them from the shelter. "It's safer than anywhere else tonight," he finally murmured. His words were steady, but his heart hammered with fear. They had nowhere else to go. The shelter had always been rough, but the last few weeks had been unbearable. Officer Reeves, the man responsible for monitoring the boys, treated them like criminals instead of children. "Foreign troublemakers," he'd muttered under his breath whenever they passed. That night, when a misunderstanding sparked a confrontation in the hall, Reeves snapped. He shoved Yusuf, called Omar a slur, and threatened to have them taken by child services again. Terrified of being separated, the brothers ran. They didn't stop for 8 blocks. Only when they reached the cemetery, the one their late father used to bring them to during Eid prayers, did they feel a shred of familiarity. "Baba said this place protects people," Omar whispered, clinging to Yusuf's coat. "Then it will protect us tonight," Yusuf said, though even he didn't fully believe it. They settled between two old tombstones where the ground dipped into a shallow hollow, sheltered from the wind. Yusuf removed his thin jacket and wrapped it around Omar's shoulders, ignoring his brother's protests. The cold seeped into their bones. Hunger clawed at their stomachs. Yet in the midst of their fear, a ritual older than their grief surfaced. Yusuf knelt on the frozen earth and raised his hands. Omar followed. Together, under the dim moon, they whispered their prayers. Words their father had taught them. Words their mother used to recite before bed. Words that felt like the last thread keeping them tethered to hope. "O Allah, watch over us. Please." Their voices shivered into the night, carried away by the wind. What they didn't know was that someone had already called the police about 2 suspicious boys hiding in a graveyard. And that report had reached the inbox of Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, who was preparing for bed when he saw it. Normally, such tips went through staff, but something in the message struck him. 2 Muslim children, near the very cemetery community elders kept complaining was being neglected. Something felt wrong. 15 minutes later, Zohran was in his coat, stepping into the freezing air, heading toward the cemetery. As he reached the gate, his flashlight cut across the stones. He heard whispering, soft, shaky. The kind of whisper that only comes from children praying for safety. He froze. "Ya Allah," he murmured. "Who is out here at this hour?" And as he stepped forward, the miracle the city would never forget quietly began. The beam of the flashlight swept across the frost-covered grass, illuminating the outlines of gravestones like silent witnesses. Yusuf heard the sound first, the crunch of boots approaching slowly, methodically, not like a stranger passing by, but like someone searching. His breath froze in his throat. He pressed Omar closer to him, whispering urgently, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Omar nodded, burying his face into his brother's chest. The light grew brighter. Then a voice, steady and calm, cut through the cold air. "I know you're there. I'm not here to hurt you." Yusuf felt his muscles tighten. Adults always said that before something bad happened. He stayed silent, hoping the darkness would swallow them whole. Zohran stopped a few meters away, lowering the flashlight. He didn't want to blind them, he wanted them to feel safe. "My name is Zohran," he said gently. "I'm an assemblyman. Someone reported that 2 boys might be in danger here." Still nothing. He could barely even hear their breathing. He softened his tone even further. "Are you okay?" "I promise, I'm alone." Finally, a tremor of movement, a shadow shifting behind a tombstone. Then another. Zohran crouched, lowering himself to their level. "It's freezing out here," he said softly. "Please let me help you." Slowly, painfully slowly, a thin figure rose just enough to be seen. Yusuf. His face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes burning with suspicion. "We don't trust police," Yusuf said. The word stunned Zohran. He stood still, recognizing the weight behind them. "I'm not here with the police," he said. "And I'm not calling them. I'm here because someone told me 2 boys might be scared, cold, or in trouble." Yusuf hesitated. He scanned Zohran's coat, his hands, his posture. No badge. No weapon. Just concern. Behind him, Omar peeked out, his small face red from the cold. Zohran's heart constricted. "How old are you two?" he asked. 15, Yusuf said. "He's 10. Zohran exhaled slowly. Children. 2 children hiding among graves because the world had given them nowhere else. He removed his scarf and extended it gently. "Take this." "You're freezing." Yusuf didn't move. "Why would you help us?" he asked, voice cracking from fear and exhaustion. Zohran looked at them, really looked. 2 boys who had lost more than anyone their age should. 2 boys praying in a cemetery because prayer was the only thing they had left. "Because someone helped me once when I was lost," he said quietly. "And because no child should ever have to hide like this." His flashlight flickered across the graves, illuminating their father's tombstone without him realizing it. Omar stepped out, shivering violently. "We don't want to go back," he whispered. "They're mean there." The desperation in the child's voice tore through Zohran's chest. He knelt in the cold dirt, eye level with them both. "You're not going back," he said with conviction. "Not tonight. Not ever without safety." And with those words, a thread of trust, thin as dawn light, finally began to take shape between the 3 of them. For a long moment, the only sound among the gravestones was the wind slipping between them. Yusuf kept his arm firmly around Omar, as if afraid the boy would be snatched away if he loosened his grip even for a second. Zohran didn't rush them. He stayed kneeling on the cold ground, breathing slowly, showing his empty hands so they'd know he wasn't a threat. Finally, Yusuf spoke. His voice was low and tight, each word dragged out like it hurt to say. "They said we were trouble," he whispered. "At the shelter. They didn't like that we prayed. They didn't like that we're Muslim." Omar hugged himself, shivering despite Zohran's scarf now wrapped around his neck. "Officer Reeves yelled at us all the time," he added timidly. He said, "You people were dangerous." The way he said it, the way the slur seemed too heavy for a 10-year-old to carry, made Zohran's stomach twist. He'd heard these stories before, too many times. But hearing them from children hiding in a cemetery made it feel different. It felt unforgivable. Yusuf continued, the words spilling faster now, as if holding them in had become too painful. "Last night he pushed me," he said. He grabbed Omar's backpack and told him he didn't deserve anything from this country. Yusuf's jaw clenched as he swallowed hard. "I told him to stop. He got angrier. Said he'd split us up. Said I'd go to one home and Omar to another because brothers like us shouldn't stick together." Zohran inhaled sharply. Splitting siblings was against every protocol and every law protecting minors. "He threatened that?" Yusuf nodded. "That's why we ran. We didn't know where to go. Baba used to bring us here. This cemetery, it was peaceful. And we thought maybe," he hesitated, eyes burning, "maybe Allah would hear us better here." That sentence broke something inside Zohran. No child should ever feel they needed to hide among graves to be heard by God. He placed a gentle hand on the frozen earth beside them, close enough to show solidarity, far enough not to frighten. "Listen to me," he said softly. "Officer Reeves won't touch either of you again. I give you my word." Omar looked up, fear and hope tangled in his eyes. "But what if they take us away? What if they say we lied?" Zohran shook his head firmly. The truth doesn't need protection, it only needs someone willing to speak it. He looked at Yusuf, admiration rising in him. And you spoke it. Even when it terrified you. Yusuf blinked, unsure how to react. No adult had ever said that to him before. Zohran stood slowly and extended his hand. Let's get you both somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. Tonight, you stay with me. Tomorrow, we make sure the whole system hears what Officer Reeves did. Yusuf hesitated only a second before taking his brother's hand and rising. Omar reached for Zohran's other hand, small, cold, trembling, and for the first time that night, something like safety settled over them. As they walked toward the cemetery gate beneath the pale glow of the moon, Yusuf whispered, "Do you think Baba would be proud?" Zohran squeezed Omar's hand gently. He already is. The walk from the cemetery to the street felt endless for the boys. Every sudden sound, a distant horn, a barking dog, a passing car, made Omar flinch and cling to Yusuf's sleeve. Zohran kept a steady pace beside them, shielding them with his presence. When they reached his car, he opened the back door carefully, as though handling something fragile. "You're safe here," he said. Yusuf eyed the vehicle with suspicion, memories of police cars tightening his chest. "This isn't like their cars, right?" he asked quietly. Zohran shook his head. No flashing lights. No handcuffs. Just heat and seat belts. Omar climbed in first, shivering as warmth enveloped him. Yusuf hesitated a moment longer, then followed. When the doors shut, the silence inside felt softer than the cold outside. As they drove toward Astoria, city lights passing like falling stars, the boys slowly began to thaw, physically and emotionally. Omar watched Zohran through the rearview mirror, his big brown eyes filled with curiosity. "Why did you come?" he asked. "Most grown-ups, they don't come." Zohran considered his answer carefully. "Because sometimes," he said, "God puts you exactly where you're supposed to be. And tonight, I was supposed to find you." Omar absorbed the words with a seriousness only frightened children have. Yusuf, still tense, stared out the window. "We don't want trouble," he murmured. "We just want to stay together." Zohran's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then that is exactly what will happen," he replied. "No system, no officer, no threat will tear you apart." When they arrived at Zohran's small apartment, the boys stepped inside cautiously, almost reverently, as though they were entering a mosque instead of a living room. The space was warm, modest, and filled with books, philosophy, history, poetry. Omar gravitated toward a framed photo on the shelf. "Is that your family?" he asked. Zohran nodded, smiling faintly. "My parents in Uganda. They taught me that if someone knocks on your door in need, you open it." He walked to the kitchen and returned with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Omar took his with both hands, eyes widening in delight. Yusuf hesitated until Zohran gently nudged the mug closer. "You're allowed to rest," he said softly. For the first time that night, Yusuf let himself exhale. Later, after the boys had taken warm showers and changed into oversized pajamas loaned by Zohran, they stood awkwardly in the doorway of his guest room. "You can sleep here," he said, laying 2 blankets across the bed. But Omar shook his head. "Can we stay together? On the floor?" Zohran smiled. "Of course." He arranged cushions and blankets into a small nest on the carpet. The boys curled up side by side, Omar resting his head on Yusuf's arm just like he used to when their parents were alive. Before turning off the light, Zohran knelt beside them. "If you need anything," he said, "I'm right here." Omar's voice was already drifting into sleep. "Are you gonna stay?" "Yes," Zohran whispered. And he did, sitting on the floor by the door until the sun began to rise, guarding the 2 brothers who had finally stopped running. That night, the miracle wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't angels or lightning or divine signs. It was simply this: 2 frightened boys who had prayed among the dead were now sleeping safely among the living, watched over by a man who had chosen compassion over convenience. By sunrise, the apartment smelled of cardamom tea and toasted bread. Omar slept curled like a cat, but Yusuf had been awake for nearly an hour, staring at the ceiling. The safety of the night had faded into the hard light of morning, bringing back the weight of reality. When Zohran stepped into the room, Yusuf sat up abruptly. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Zohran said calmly, "we protect you. We tell the truth. And we make sure no one harms you again." But as he spoke, his phone vibrated repeatedly. Missed calls. Voicemails. A text from his aide, "Call me now. It's about the boys." He stepped into the hallway and dialed. His aide answered at once, breathless. "Assemblyman, Reeves filed a report. Says the boys ran away from lawful custody and claims you abducted them." Zohran froze. "He what?" "He's spinning the story. Says you interfered with official procedures. Social services is already involved." Zohran's jaw tightened. Reeves wasn't just covering his tracks, he was preparing to destroy the boys' credibility before they could speak. "He won't get away with it," Zohran muttered. But the aide's voice darkened. "He's also saying the boys are radicalized and that you're harboring them. He's trying to frame this as a security issue." Zohran returned to the living room, trying to keep calm for the children's sake. Omar looked up from his tea. "Are you mad?" he asked softly. "Not at you," Zohran said. "Never at you." Yusuf watched him carefully. "It's Reeves, isn't it?" he asked. "He's coming for us." Zohran sat across from them. "He's trying. But he won't win." The boys exchanged a nervous glance. "People like him, they always win," Yusuf said bitterly. "Not this time," Zohran replied. "Because this time, you're not alone." But as if summoned by their fear, a loud knock erupted at the door, sharp, forceful, unmistakable. Omar flinched so hard he nearly spilled his tea. Yusuf grabbed his brother's arm, pulling him back. Zohran stood, spine stiffening, and approached the door. Through the peephole, he saw 2 uniformed officers and 1 man in plain clothes, Reeves. His smirk was unmistakable. Zohran unlocked the door but left the chain on. "You're early," he said coldly. Reeves stepped forward. "You're harboring minors who fled supervised custody. Open the door. They're coming with us." Zohran didn't blink. "Supervised custody? You threatened them. You assaulted them. I have testimony, and I'll have witnesses." Reeves scoffed. "They're minors. Immigrant minors. No one believes kids like that over a sworn officer." Behind Zohran, Yusuf heard everything. Every word cut into him like a blade. Omar started shaking uncontrollably. "He's lying," Omar whispered. "He's lying again." Zohran raised his voice so the boys could hear him. "Officer Reeves, until there is a legal order, no one enters this home. Leave." Reeves leaned closer to the crack in the door. "You think you're a hero because you picked up 2 runaway boys?" His tone turned venomous. "You're going to regret interfering. And those kids," he paused, letting the threat hang like poison in the air. "They'll regret trusting you." Zohran shut the door in his face. Hard. The chain rattled, startling Omar. Zohran inhaled, steadying his own fury before turning to the boys. "Pack your things," he said calmly. "We have to leave. Now." Yusuf stood quickly. "Where are we going?" Zohran grabbed his coat. "To someone who can protect you better than I can. Someone Reeves can't intimidate." In his mind, one name echoed, Imam Karim, the community leader who had known the boy's father, the one man whose voice could challenge a corrupt system and be heard. The miracle was far from over. The storm had just begun. Zohran moved through the apartment with a calmness that hid the urgency boiling beneath his ribs. Yusuf and Omar followed him closely, their small backpacks slung over their shoulders, everything they owned contained in a few pieces of clothing and a worn-out Quran that had belonged to their father. Stay close to me, Zohran said as he opened the door. Reeves and the officers were gone, but the hallway still felt suffocating, like the building itself had absorbed the tension. He guided the boys down the stairwell instead of the elevator. Less chance of running into trouble, he murmured. Omar clung to the railing, his steps unsteady. Yusuf kept one arm around him to steady his brother's trembling. Once outside, the morning air bit sharply at their skin. A white van idled across the street, and Zohran stiffened, but after a closer look, he recognized the bakery logo on the side. Not a police vehicle. Not Reeves. Just a man delivering bread. Still, he hurried the boys toward his car, glancing over his shoulder more than once. When they finally settled in, Omar whispered, "Is he coming again?" "Not now," Zohran said. "But he will try." The honesty in his voice frightened Yusuf, yet also reassured him. For once, an adult wasn't pretending everything was fine, he was fighting to make it so. Zohran started the engine. "We're going to Imam Karim," he said. "He was a friend of your father. He knows the law. And he knows how to protect children." Yusuf blinked. "Baba never told us that." "Your father trusted him," Zohran replied. "And so do I." The drive to Mott Haven took nearly 30 minutes. The streets blurred past, graffiti-covered walls, corner stores opening for the day, the elevated train roaring overhead. Omar pressed his forehead against the glass as if the city could answer all the questions rattling inside him. "Will the Imam be mad at us?" he asked suddenly. "For running away?" Zohran shook his head. "No one who loves God is angry at children seeking safety." Yusuf swallowed hard. "But he'll know we're trouble." "You're not trouble," Zohran said firmly. "What Reeves did is trouble. What the system ignored is trouble. You?" He glanced at them in the mirror. "You're just boys who deserve better." The sincerity made Yusuf look away quickly, hiding the burn behind his eyes. Imam Karim's house sat beside a small mosque, its green dome glowing gently in the sunlight. As Zohran parked, a tall, elderly man with a white beard and kind eyes stepped onto the porch, as if he had been waiting. "Assalamu alaikum," he called out, his voice deep and warm. "Zohran, is that you?" Zohran ushered the boys out of the car. "Wa alaikum assalam, Imam. I need your help." The Imam's gaze dropped to Yusuf and Omar. His expression softened instantly. "These must be Daoud's sons," he said. Omar froze. Yusuf gasped. You knew our father?" The Imam placed a gentle hand on Yusuf's shoulder. "Your father prayed beside me for years. He was a good man, and he loved you more than life itself." The boys crumbled into his embrace as though a weight they'd carried for years had suddenly collapsed. Yusuf trembled violently, the facade of strength finally cracking. Omar sobbed into the Imam's robe. We didn't know where to go," Yusuf choked. "Then you came exactly to the right place," the Imam whispered, holding them both. He looked over their heads at Zohran, a silent exchange of gratitude and urgency. "Bring them inside," he said. "We have much to discuss. And even more to protect." As they entered the home, the Imam closed the door with a firmness that felt almost ceremonial, a promise, a shield, a declaration that no harm would pass beyond that threshold. The miracle that began in the cemetery was growing. Now it had a guardian. Inside the Imam's home, warmth wrapped around the brothers like a blanket they had been denied for far too long. The scent of saffron rice and burning incense drifted through the halls, and a large bookshelf lined the living room, filled with Qur'ans, history books, and thick volumes of Islamic jurisprudence. The Imam guided Yusuf and Omar to a cushioned bench. "Sit, my sons," he said gently. "You've walked through fear. Now you must rest." Omar leaned against Yusuf, still sniffling, while Zohran took a seat across from them, visibly relieved to see the boys finally safe indoors. But safety didn't erase the questions swirling in Yusuf's mind. He looked up, his voice hesitant. "Imam, how did you know our father?" Baba never talked much about his past. The Imam's eyes softened with memory. Your father, Dowd, was a man of extraordinary dignity. When he arrived in New York, he had nothing but a backpack and a dream that his sons would grow up free, free to worship, free to speak, free to walk without fear. Omar wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his borrowed shirt. Did Baba tell you about us? The Imam nodded. He told me everything. He worried about what would happen if he was no longer here to protect you. Zohran leaned forward, sensing something deeper in the Imam's words. What did he mean? The Imam reached into a wooden chest near the bookshelf and pulled out a small leather pouch. Its stitching was worn, as though opened and closed many times. This, he said, placing it in Yusuf's hands, was entrusted to me 4 years ago. Your father told me, if anything ever happens to me, give this to Yusuf when he is old enough to protect his brother. Yusuf stared at the pouch as though it burned. His hands shook. Omar whispered, open it. Yusuf hesitated, then slowly pulled the string. Inside was a folded document, yellowed at the edges, and a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Yusuf lifted it with trembling fingers. This was Baba's, he whispered. He wore it every day, the Imam nodded. And he wanted you to have it. But it was the document that made Zohran lean closer. Yusuf unfolded it carefully, and gasped. It was a letter. His father's handwriting. My sons. If you are reading this, then Allah has called me to something greater. Yusuf, you must protect your brother. Omar, you must listen to Yusuf. And both of you must trust Imam Karim, he will guard you as I did. If the world grows dark, find Zohran Mamdani. He is a man of justice. A man who will not abandon those in need. You are not alone. Not now. Not ever. Baba. Silence engulfed the room. Yusuf reread the name as though he couldn't believe it. Baba knew you, he whispered, staring at Zohran. Zohran's chest tightened. I didn't know he remembered me. We met years ago at a tenants' rights rally. He stood beside me when no one else would. The Imam nodded. Your father saw something in him. And now we see why. Omar clutched the pendant tightly. Does this mean? Allah wanted us to find you, he asked, voice trembling with fragile hope. Zohran swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. Maybe, he whispered. Maybe your father left a path for you. And somehow, you followed it even through fear. The Imam placed a hand on each boy's shoulder. Your father prepared for this moment. You were meant to survive. And you were meant to be found. A revelation. A connection deeper than coincidence. A miracle woven long before the night in the cemetery. The peaceful quiet inside the Imam's home didn't last long. As the boys finished their meal and the Imam guided them to a guest room to rest, Zohran's phone buzzed again, this time not with texts, but with headlines. His aide sent him a single link with 3 words, it's starting now. Zohran tapped the screen. A local news outlet had published a story titled, 2 minors missing, officer claims politician interfered. Beneath it was a photo of Reeves, standing in front of the shelter, giving a rehearsed, solemn statement. Our priority, Reeves said with exaggerated gravitas, is the safety of these runaway boys. We fear they may be influenced by outside political actors. Zohran nearly crushed the phone in his hand. He's framing them as criminals, he muttered. The Imam stepped beside him, reading over his shoulder. His expression hardened, unusual for his normally calm demeanor. He wants to turn the boys into a threat, the Imam said. This is how injustice survives, by flipping truth until the truth looks dangerous. Zohran exhaled sharply. If he controls the narrative, he controls their fate. And Reeves was moving fast, statements to the press, calls to social services, even a request for an emergency custody order. The system wasn't just corrupt now, it was mobilizing. Omar and Yusuf were no longer just scared boys, they were becoming targets of a machine built to silence them. Suddenly, the Imam's landline rang, an old rotary phone with a shrill sound that cut through the room. He answered, Assalamu alaikum? A pause. Then his brows knitted. No, officer. The children are safe. Another pause. You will not enter my mosque without a warrant. His voice, though soft, carried a steel the boys had never heard. He hung up slowly. They're coming, he said. Reeves knows you brought them to me. Yusuf stiffened. Omar's eyes widened with terror. He wants to take us away, Omar whispered. He'll split us. I know he will. Zohran knelt immediately beside the boys. Look at me, he said. Both of you. They looked. No one is taking you. Not while I'm breathing. His words were calm but had the weight of an oath. Then he turned to the imam. We need to move them. Somewhere Reeves has no authority. The imam stroked his beard thoughtfully. There is a place, hidden, quiet. A safe house for refugees. Not police-run, community-run. Zohran nodded. We take them there tonight. But the system was already pressing on them. More headlines exploded online. Community imam refuses to cooperate with child services. Questions rise about missing Muslim boys. Why is Assemblyman Mamdani hiding minors? It was a smear campaign, fast, coordinated, and ruthless. The kind meant to bury truth before truth found its voice. Zohran's phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Reeves. He played it on speaker. You can run, Mamdani. But those boys are ours by law. And if you keep hiding them, you'll go down before sunrise. Omar burst into tears. Yusuf held him tightly, fury burning in his eyes. He thinks no one can stop him, Yusuf whispered. Zohran stood, spine straight as iron. Then let's prove him wrong. He turned to the imam. Get them ready. We leave in 10 minutes. The imam nodded. Allah walks with the oppressed, he murmured. And in that small living room, with fear pressing against the windows and injustice gathering like a storm, a decision was made, not in anger, but in faith. The system was coming. But so was justice. Night fell over the Bronx like a heavy curtain. The imam's mosque, normally alive with the sounds of evening prayer, sat in tense silence. Only one small light glowed beside the side entrance, a signal for those who understood the community's old code, safety in shadows. Yusuf and Omar stood near the door in borrowed coats, their small backpacks strapped tightly against their shoulders. Yusuf's eyes were sharp, alert, protective. Omar gripped his brother's hand with white knuckles. Zohran checked the street from behind the curtain. 2 unmarked cars had been parked at the corner for the last 15 minutes. Reeves wasn't even pretending to hide his surveillance anymore. We leave through the alley, Zohran whispered. No one makes a sound. The imam nodded, grabbing a flashlight with its lens taped to dim the beam. Allah guides those who walk with courage, he murmured as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulders. Omar swallowed hard. Will they catch us? He whispered. Not tonight, Zohran answered. Not as long as you follow me. They slipped out the back door. The cold air slapped their faces instantly, and the narrow alley swallowed them in darkness. Trash cans, old bricks, and broken crates formed a maze of shadows. Zohran led the way, moving quickly but silently. Yusuf followed with determined steps, pulling Omar close to his side. The imam came last, his robes brushing softly against the stone. Halfway down the alley, footsteps echoed from the street. Loud. Rushed. Reeves, Yusuf whispered. Zohran held up a hand. Stop. The footsteps drew closer, and a flashlight beam sliced across the wall just inches from their hiding place. They pressed against the cold brick, barely breathing as voices bounced down the alley. They're nearby. The imam's too calm, they're moving the kids. Should we check the back? Do it. If Mamdani's here, he's going down tonight. Omar trembled uncontrollably. Yusuf wrapped both arms around him, shielding him with his own body. Zohran looked at the imam. We need another route, he mouthed. The imam nodded and pointed to a rusted metal gate half hidden by a pile of crates. Old service entrance. It connects to the neighbor's parking lot. Zohran quietly moved the crates aside. The gate creaked horribly. All four froze. The voices grew louder. Did you hear that? Down the alley. Zohran whispered urgently, through the gate. Now. Yusuf shoved Omar through the narrow opening first, then crawled after him. The imam squeezed in behind them. Zohran followed last, pulling the gate shut just as flashlights flooded the alley. The boys huddled behind a dumpster as Reeves and two officers stormed past the gate. They couldn't have gotten far, Reeves snapped. Check every yard, every basement. Zohran crouched beside the boys, his heart pounding. They won't find us, he whispered. Stay quiet. When the footsteps finally faded, the imam pointed to the end of the parking lot. A dark sedan waited there with its engine idling. A woman in her 40s stepped out, a social worker from the mosque's refugee network. Get in, she said softly. We take them to the safe house now. As Yusuf and Omar climbed into the car, Omar looked back at the alley with wide, fearful eyes. Why won't they just let us live? He whispered. Zohran knelt beside him, meeting his gaze with steady resolve. Because some people fear what they refuse to understand, he said. But fear doesn't get the final word. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You survived the cemetery. You survived Reeves. You'll survive this too. The imam nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. Tonight, my sons, he said, you walk the path of your father's strength. The car pulled away, disappearing into the night. Behind them, in the alley lit only by cold moonlight, Reeves searched desperately, but the boys were already gone. Gone to safety. Gone toward the miracle none of them yet understood. The drive to the safe house was quiet, almost eerily so. Yusuf stayed alert, watching every intersection through the back window as if expecting Reeves to appear out of the darkness. Omar sat tucked beneath his brother's arm, his breath fogging the window as he whispered surahs under his breath, short prayers their father had taught them to calm fear. Zohran rode in the front passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the side mirrors, scanning every car that trailed behind. The social worker, Sister Miriam, drove with steady hands, her expression calm despite the tension filling the vehicle. We've hidden families from worse, she said softly. Tonight, Allah walks faster than danger. The safe house sat behind a boarded-up storefront in the South Bronx. To anyone else, it looked abandoned, windows covered in dust, graffiti tagging the front, a rusted metal grate pulled halfway down. But Miriam lifted the grate with practiced ease, revealing a narrow staircase leading to a basement lit by warm yellow lamps. As the boys descended the steps, the air shifted from cold concrete to comforting heat. Rugs covered the floor. Blankets rested neatly on a couch. The smell of lentil soup drifted from a small kitchen. Yusuf blinked in disbelief. Omar whispered, "It feels like home." Inside sat 4 people, 2 older men playing chess, a woman folding laundry, and a teenager scribbling homework. They all looked up as the group entered. Instead of questions, instead of suspicion, there was only welcome. "Assalamu alaikum," the woman said with a warm smile. "You must be Daoud's sons." Omar stepped closer to Yusuf, surprised. "Everyone knows Baba?" "Everyone who loved justice knew him," one of the chess players replied. "Your father helped many refugees find safety. Now safety returns the favor." Zohran sat with Yusuf and Omar on the couch, finally able to breathe. "You'll stay here until we clear your names," he said. Yusuf's brows tightened. "Clear our names? We didn't do anything." "Exactly," Zohran replied, his voice gentle but firm. "But Reeves is trying to make the world think otherwise." Miriam brought them each a bowl of soup. Omar devoured his instantly, tears pricking his eyes at the warmth. Yusuf ate slower, watching Zohran carefully. "What if the police find this place?" he asked. The imam stepped into the room then, having followed in a separate car. "They won't," he said. "This house has protected people for 20 years. Women escaping violent homes. Men fleeing tyrants. Children like you, trying to stay together. The teenager at the table, a Syrian boy named Tariq, approached with shy curiosity. You can share my room, he said. It has 2 beds. And a nightlight. Omar's face lit up for the first time in days. A nightlight, he repeated. Tariq nodded. It's a little crescent moon. I thought you'd like it. Yusuf smiled faintly, tired, grateful, overwhelmed. Thank you. As the boys settled into their temporary room, the Imam pulled Zohran aside. We must act quickly, he warned. Reeves is dangerous. And when men like him start to lose control, they become unpredictable. Zohran nodded. We'll go public. We'll expose everything, the threats, the lies, the abuse. The Imam stroked his beard. Then prepare yourself. Because truth has a cost. Later that night, after the house had fallen quiet, Yusuf and Omar curled beneath thick quilts. For the first time since their father died, they felt something resembling peace. Omar gazed at the crescent nightlight glowing softly on the wall. Do you think Baba sees us? He whispered. Yusuf closed his eyes, pressing the silver pendant to his chest. I think, he said softly, this is exactly where he wanted us to be. Outside, the wind howled. But inside, for the first time in a long time, the boys slept without fear. By the next morning, Zohran Mamdani realized the battle had shifted from hidden alleyways to the public arena. His phone buzzed nonstop, journalists, activists, lawyers, community leaders all asking the same question, is it true? Are 2 Muslim children being hunted by a corrupt officer? Reeves had overplayed his hand. His aggressive tactics, his attempt to criminalize 2 boys, had sparked whispers in mosques, churches, and community centers across the city. And whispers in New York had a way of becoming roars. At noon, Zohran stood on the steps of a community center in Harlem, surrounded by microphones and cameras. The Imam stood beside him, and behind them gathered nearly 200 people, Muslim families, civil rights groups, interfaith leaders, and ordinary New Yorkers who had heard enough. We are here, Zohran began, voice steady but heavy with emotion, because 2 children were threatened, not protected. Because a system that should safeguard the vulnerable tried to silence them. And because one officer, whose name we will no longer hide, abused his authority to terrorize minors. Gasps spread through the crowd as he continued, the boys are safe. They are cared for. And they will not be handed back into fear. Reporters fired questions, but Zohran raised a hand. Before we discuss policy, let me say this, these children are not criminals. They are not dangerous. They are not a threat to this city. They are brothers who prayed in a cemetery because the world had given them no refuge but the dead. A tremor moved through the crowd. Mothers in hijabs held their children tighter. Elderly men wiped tears from their beards. Cameras flashed relentlessly. The real threat, Zohran said, is a system that allows men like Officer Reeves to hold power unchecked. That ends today. Inside the safe house, Yusuf and Omar watched the live stream from a small laptop. Omar's eyes widened. He's talking about us, he whispered. All these people, they came for us? Yusuf felt his throat tighten. For years, they had been invisible, 2 shadows drifting through shelters and case files. Now the entire city was saying their names with respect instead of suspicion. We're not alone anymore, Yusuf murmured. Even Tariq, sitting beside them, grinned proudly. Your story woke the whole city up, he said. That's not small. After the press conference, a wave of support swept across social media. Hashtag stand with Yusuf and Omar. Hashtag protect our children. Hashtag justice for the brothers. Politicians reached out. Lawyers volunteered pro bono. Activists organized marches. Even teachers from the boys' old school sent messages offering help. The Imam received calls from mosques all over the country, some offering shelter, others offering protection teams, others simply praying. It was bigger than anyone expected. And Reeves knew it. Late that evening, he stood outside the precinct, surrounded by reporters. His jaw was clenched, his eyes cold. Assemblyman Mamdani is manipulating these boys, he spat. He's turning them into political tools. They must be returned to state custody. But this time, instead of nodding along, the reporters pressed him hard. Why did the boys flee? Why did you threaten to separate them? Why did they end up praying in a cemetery? Reeves' face twitched with panic. He wasn't controlling the story anymore. Back in the safe house, the boys sat with Zohran and the imam as news coverage replayed their words. Omar hugged his pillow tightly. I'm scared, he said quietly. What if Reeves wins? Zohran placed a gentle arm around him. Look outside, he said. They went to the small basement window. Through the narrow pane of glass, they saw people gathering on the street, neighbors, activists, journalists, strangers holding signs with candles. You are safe with U.S. Brothers deserve protection. No more silence. Yusuf felt his chest ache with emotion. They're here, for us, he whispered again. The imam smiled, placing a hand on each boy's shoulder. Children, he said softly, when truth is spoken with courage, a city rises. Tonight, New York stands with you. And for the first time since their father's death. The boys believed it. It was nearly midnight when the safe house phone rang. Sister Miriam answered, listened silently, then hurried into the room where Zohran, the imam, and the boys Saturday. It's happening, she said. The city wants to gather. Zohran stood immediately. Where? Miriam hesitated for a moment. At the cemetery, she said. The place where you found them. Yusuf and Omar exchanged a frightened glance. The cemetery? Omar whispered. But that's where we were hiding. And where you were praying, the imam added gently. Where you called out to Allah for protection. Perhaps the people want to answer that prayer. 10 minutes later, they were in the car again, escorted by volunteers who formed a protective convoy. As they neared the cemetery gate, Yusuf's breath caught. Hundreds of people stood waiting. Lanterns glowed like floating stars. Candles flickered in cupped hands. Muslims, Christians, Jews, atheists, families, activists, elders, all stood united. The night air buzzed with something sacred. Something electric. Something impossible to describe except with one word, hope. The imam stepped out first, then Zohran. When the boys emerged, the crowd parted instinctively, creating a path lined with people whispering blessings. Omar gripped Yusuf's arm, overwhelmed. Why are they looking at us like that? He murmured. Yusuf swallowed hard. Maybe, because we survived. At the front of the crowd stood a small podium where Zohran was expected to speak. But when he reached the microphone, he didn't lift it. Instead, he turned to Yusuf. Tonight, he said softly, this story is yours. Not mine. A hush fell over the cemetery. Yusuf's eyes widened, fear gripping him, the fear of speaking, of being seen, of being believed. The imam leaned close. Your father wanted you to be brave, he whispered. This is your moment. Slowly, painfully, Yusuf stepped forward. Omar followed, standing right beside him. My name is Yusuf, he began, his voice shaking. This is my brother, Omar. We didn't run because we're bad. We ran because we were scared. Because we were told we didn't belong. Because someone with power used it to hurt us. His voice broke, but he kept going. We prayed here that night. We asked Allah to help us. And then, someone came. He looked at Zohran. Maybe that was the miracle. Maybe Allah sent someone who listens. The crowd rippled with emotion. Some wiped tears. Others bowed their heads in respect. Omar tugged Yusuf's sleeve, asking permission with his eyes. Yusuf nodded. Omar stepped up to the microphone. We just want to stay together, he whispered. We just want to live without fear. Silence. Then, a single voice from the crowd shouted, You will. Another, "We're with you." Then a wave erupted. "Protect our children. Justice for the brothers. No more fear." The cemetery trembled with the force of unity. At the back of the crowd, Officer Reeves appeared, flanked by internal affairs investigators. His face was pale, furious, unraveling. But this time, when he stepped forward, he wasn't the hunter, he was the hunted. The investigators blocked his path. "Officer Reeves," one said, "you're under arrest for misconduct, falsifying reports, and child endangerment." Gasps swept the crowd. Reeves stammered, "They're lying." But his voice was drowned out by the chants. Justice had arrived. He was led away in handcuffs, the same handcuffs he had once threatened children with. The imam turned Yusuf and Omar toward the crowd. "Tonight," he whispered, "you changed the fate of many. Not just your own." Lanterns were lifted into the air. Candles glowed brighter. The cemetery that once held their fear now held their freedom. As the brothers stood beneath the moonlight, Zohran placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Your father said you'd never be alone," he whispered. And tonight, he was right. The wind that swept through the cemetery was no longer cold, it felt warm, gentle, almost like an embrace. The miracle had happened. Not in the sky. Not in the earth. But in the hearts of everyone who chose compassion over fear. And from that night on, Yusuf and Omar were never afraid again. If you made it this far, subscribe, leave your like, and tell us where you're watching from. Thank you, and see you next time.